Many people have experienced this feeling. You start a job with a lot of belief. You believe that if you do it well enough, things will slowly grow. But after some time, progress moves slower than you expected. You begin looking at what other people are building, other careers, other paths. It seems like everything in their lives is moving faster, easier, and a familiar thought begins to appear in your mind. Maybe I should try something else. 2 years ago, Ethan Carter made a decision like that. One evening, he locked the door of his small bakery, turned off the lights, and walked away. At the time, Ethan believed he was simply choosing a better path. He didn't know that decision would cost him 3 more years just to return to where he had started. Ethan Carter was 23 when he opened his first bakery. It was on a small street corner in Austin, Texas, a neighborhood that was changing quickly. Old buildings were turning into modern cafes. Startups were popping up on every block. Young people talked about crypto, AI, and e-commerce like they were the future of everything. And Ethan baked birthday cakes. He learned the craft from a small family bakery when he was still in high school. He loved the feeling of kneading dough by hand, the smell of butter melting in the oven, and most of all, the moment when a customer opened a cake box and smiled. Ethan believed that if he made great cakes, customers would slowly find him. The first few months moved quietly. Every morning, Ethan opened the shop at 7. He turned on the lights, prepared the dough, started the oven. The smell of fresh bread drifted outside the small storefront. A few customers began to stop by. A birthday cake for a child, a small cake for a family dinner. Not many, but not empty either. After a few months, a few regulars appeared. A woman who ordered a cake every week for her son. A couple who stopped to eat almost every weekend. Revenue was growing, but very slowly. And that was when Ethan began to lose patience. One afternoon, he stood outside his shop and looked across the street. A new cafe had opened. Within a few weeks, the place was full. People sat with laptops, taking photos of lattes, talking and laughing all afternoon. Ethan watched that cafe for a long time. Then he looked back at his own shop. A thought slowly appeared. Maybe things were moving too slowly. In the days that followed, every time he passed the cafe, he looked over. Some days the bakery only had a few orders, but across the street, there were always customers. Ethan started imagining, what if I opened a cafe? Maybe I could do it too. Maybe things would grow faster. The thought didn't go away. It came back again and again. And eventually, less than a year later, Ethan locked the door of his bakery, turned off the lights, and left. He didn't think it was failure. He believed he had found a better direction. His cafe opened with a lot of hope. A nicer space, a better coffee machine, a clean, minimal design. The first few weeks were exciting. Friends came to support him. New customers stopped by to try the drinks and check in on social media. But after a few months, when the place was no longer new, customers slowly faded, and Ethan started looking outside again. Another cafe opened on a busier street. A friend of his was making money selling things online. Another had just started doing marketing for a startup. and Ethan felt the same familiar feeling again. Maybe this still isn't fast enough. After that came a series of new decisions: an online store, a marketing course, a small business project with friends. Then, a few more ideas. Every time he started something new, Ethan felt the same thing: hope. The feeling that this time might be different. But a few months later, when things still moved slowly, the same thought came back again. 3 years passed that way. If you looked at Ethan from the outside, you would think he was very active, always trying new things, always busy. But only he knew that he was lost between too many crossroads. And then, one summer afternoon, a small, unexpected encounter changed the way Ethan saw everything. On a Saturday afternoon, Ethan drove outside Austin. He stopped near a small lake where people often came for picnics. At the end of the road stood a tiny handmade ice cream stand. Nothing fancy, just a wooden counter, a handwritten menu, an old freezer. But in front of the stand, there was a line, a family, 2 couples, a group of college students, everyone patiently waiting. Behind the counter was a man in his 50s. He scooped each serving of ice cream slowly. No rush. When it was Ethan's turn, he ordered a vanilla cone. While waiting, he asked, "Did this place just open?" The man smiled gently. "No, about 20 years now." Ethan looked surprised. This place didn't look like a big brand. No bright signs, no advertisements, just a small stand by the road. He asked again, "You never thought about turning this into something bigger?" The man wiped his hands on a small towel and looked at Ethan. "What do you do?" he asked. Ethan smiled awkwardly. "Honestly, I've tried quite a few things." The man nodded. "How long for each one?" Ethan thought for a moment. "A few months. Sometimes a year." The man placed the ice cream on the counter. Then, he pointed behind Ethan. "You see that apple tree over there?" Ethan turned around. A large apple tree stood at the edge of the grass field. "I planted it when I was about 25. For the first 3 years, nothing happened. It was just a small tree, no fruit. Nobody noticed it." The man chuckled softly. "There were times I almost cut it down. Potatoes might have given me a harvest faster." He paused. "To be honest, I already did that once. With a pear tree before that." A breeze moved through the leaves. The man looked at the apple tree. "But this time, I decided to leave it there a little longer." He spoke slowly. "It's been almost 30 years now. Every year it gives fruit." Ethan stayed silent. He looked at the apple tree for a long moment, then down at the ice cream melting slowly in his hand. He didn't say anything then, but years later, Ethan would remember that moment many times. Driving back to Austin that night, Ethan thought for a long time about the old bakery, about the smell of bread in the oven, about the regular customers who used to visit, and one question began to appear in his mind. Maybe that path wasn't wrong. Maybe I just didn't stay long enough. 1 month later, Ethan rented a small place again. Not in an expensive neighborhood, just a quiet street corner. He opened a bakery again. But this time, he stopped looking across the street. The first 6 months were still slow, very slow. But this time, Ethan did something different. He stayed. He learned new recipes, tried new ingredients. Every day, new cakes appeared on the shelf. Better quality, better pricing. Customers slowly grew more consistent. Whenever he baked, he filmed short videos and posted them online. At first, only a few people watched. But slowly, those videos started being shared. After more than 2 years, his page had over 50,000 followers. People who loved baking began asking, "Do you teach?" So Ethan started small online classes, then baking ingredient kits for students, then weekend workshops. Everything began growing naturally, like a tree slowly spreading its branches. By the 3rd year, Ethan opened 2 more small locations, not because he was rushing, but because the bakery was finally ready. For the first time in many years, Ethan stayed long enough to see something begin to grow. One summer afternoon, Ethan returned to that ice cream stand. He stood in line, just like he did years before. But this time there was one difference. In his hands was a small box. When it was his turn, the man looked at him for a few seconds and smiled. "Ethan, you look different these days." "Still a vanilla cone?" Ethan nodded. Then he placed the box on the counter and opened it. Inside was an apple-filled pastry. "I brought this for you," Ethan said. "I made it myself, at my bakery." While the man prepared the ice cream, Ethan told him about the past 3 years, about the shop, the difficult days, and the decision to stay. The man listened quietly. Then he nodded. He looked toward the apple tree behind the field. "You know," he said slowly, "choosing something in life is a lot like planting a tree. If you want sweet fruit, you have to give it time to grow. Even when you know it will bear good fruit, it still takes years." He turned back to Ethan. "Sweet fruit doesn't arrive in a single day. It only comes to those who stay long enough. My friend, a forest is not made from a single type of tree. Each tree grows in its own time. Life works the same way. Choose a tree and care for it long enough to one day taste the fruit of your own work." If this story touched your heart, consider subscribing to the channel. Here, we simply tell small stories, but sometimes they change the way we see life.